At CoinFund, we are probably more invested crypto funds in the intersection of AI and Web3.
What's the main thing that drove you into, like blockchain?
I've been in blockchain for a long time, so I think my reasons have evolved over time. I came into blockchain when Bitcoin was the major blockchain. My thinking has evolved now that I've sort of lived with a lot of these experiments for 10 years. And I think the legacy of blockchains will not really be cryptocurrency, actually. I think it will be the ability to launch products and services as public goods. Blockchain adoption will happen in those areas that we sort of always said it would happen in. The kind of slightly boring payments and bank settlement stuff. The US will have stablecoin legislation pretty soon. A lot of people for the last 10 years have made the case that blockchain will be adopted in a consumer way. The core of all Web3 is the idea that you own your own data.
We're in Thailand with Global Blockchain Show, and today I'm with Jake from CoinFund. Jake, welcome.
Hi.
It's so great to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's an interesting scene here in Thailand, isn't it? Have you seen is anything standing out, any repetition? Because there's usually every conference I go, there's something that is more mentioned or there's a particular focus on. Have you picked up anything here?
I actually haven't been to the conference yet. So I'm not sure, but I know that Asia has been a theme for us. This year I've been to Singapore twice and now I'm in Bangkok. And it's just kind of an interesting developing market for crypto, I would say.
There's been a lot happening in Asia for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked into South Korea, like Seoul?
I've never been there.
Have you looked at the market there?
I know it's an interesting market as well. Yeah.
Yeah. They went crazy. They do all sort of things just to get merch at the conference, for example. There's a lot of real users there. I find that really interesting. What other markets have you been looking at?
Well, at CoinFund, we invest globally,
Mm-hmm.
obviously in jurisdictions where we can. But I would say the bias of our fund has been investments in North America, Europe. Definitely have done a bunch of stuff in Asia and India.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for LATAM too. I live in Miami, as we just talked about, and I think LATAM is a really interesting market for real stablecoin adoption, tokenization, this kind of stuff. But still looking for kind of that awesome investment.
Yeah, it's like stablecoins, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you see stablecoins playing out next year? This is a recurring theme. It's the layer one of the industry, it's the baseline, as many people say it. Do you see more countries adopting it? What's the view there?
I think that what we'll probably find, when we think about blockchain adoption, we'll probably find that blockchain adoption will happen in those areas that we sort of always said it would happen in. The kind of slightly boring areas like payments and, bank settlement stuff and things like that. I think taking a US-centric view, I think the US will have stablecoin legislation pretty soon. I think we already heard Chuck Schumer on a certain call called Crypto for Harris say that they want to push stablecoin legislation in before the end of the year. I don't think it will come before the end of the year. I think it will come pretty fast.
Okay.
I think we're seeing MiCA in Europe and a lot of companies in France and Germany starting to launch their own stablecoin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this is facilitating is sort of a prescient narrative of payment companies, in particular B2B cross-border payment companies. And that could be a really, really huge market that is a slam dunk for blockchain tech, right? So that's what we really want to see. We want to see broad, real, big, obvious, great adoption of this stuff. That's what I think will happen.
What's the entry point? Is it the stablecoins?
Well, I mean, obviously the blockchain's operating in a bunch of different areas, but this is an exciting one that's being accepted by regulators, legislation, governments. Like it creates obvious efficiencies. It's a great demo of what like blockchains can do.
It's definitely a great one. I mean, in terms of creating accessibility for these countries, like being in this country sometimes means, and even like some places in Europe, let's say, there's not really much you can do. Like the government really controls like how much money you can make until a certain point. You're taxed so much that it's some countries it's not even worth it to be an entrepreneur. And this is in Europe. So I imagine like when you go to Latam and Africa and other places, it's even worse. So for me, the main value I see, obviously like between us, like cities, London to New York, to whatever, like sending money, it's amazing. But in the cities, it opens opportunity. It allows for them to get like foreign money directly to them, and even transact between them without, giving view of what they're doing. Is there any strong stance within this industry that really drives your focus and like your will to participate on it and invest on it? Because this is mine.
Sorry. Your question is like, am I driven?
What's the main thing that drove you into, like blockchain?
Oh,
and to keep your focus on chain. Like, what's the end? What's at the core that motivates you in this industry?
This is a really good question. I think in the beginning, my reasons. Well, I think my reason. I've been in blockchain for a long time, so I think my reasons have evolved over time.
Right.
But I think like as I was starting out, I was asking the question of like what blockchain tech is sort of generally good for. Like I came into blockchain when Bitcoin was the major blockchain, and everyone was sort of saying like this is cryptocurrency is the thing, but I never like really truly believed that. I always thought it would kind of expand to all these like different areas.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of like really interesting stuff. We saw prediction markets, we saw DAOs, like all the stuff that we've seen in crypto. I think my thinking has evolved now that I've sort of like lived with a lot of these experiments for like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the legacy of blockchains will not really be cryptocurrency, actually. I think it will be the ability to launch products and services as public goods.
Okay. Sorry, I've been recording for a long time. Take a pause. Okay, so let's talk about social. I had the guest earlier, and we went over this. There's this. I see Web3 social working in one way, which is, or like being needed, because the main question has been like, why do we need social to be decentralized? The main reason I see is when something happens, or similar to a war, let's say, the communication outside is often cut, and they often cannot use. They can even sometimes use the internet. So if there's like a way for the government to not have access to the way these like the population accesses communication, like that was sort of the conversation. So is there a use there, and is this the key use for Web3 social? The counter on the other side was saying that we actually do not need it at all. Where do you stand?
I think I would say there's probably like two key things. Like the primary one for me would be that creating a decentralized version of social media would be more like an antidote to surveillance capitalism. So like the first and foremost, like the core Web3 primitive for me is like at the core of all Web3 is the idea that like you own your own data. Like everything else can really be built on top of that, right? Even like blockchains themselves in a way, right? Because you own your key, and if you own your key, you own like everything else. So, do we want business models where these large companies like oversee custody and monetize our data? No, in principle, we don't, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that's like the primary reason. But what you're alluding to is something very important as well, which is there's a measure of neutrality that would be nice to be enforced in these social media platforms, because social media platforms are like ubiquitous communication platforms.
Mm-hmm.
We just went through an election in the US where there's like two information silos, right? Like one, like broadly speaking, there are people who got their information from mainstream legacy media, and then there's people who got their information from Polymarket and Twitter, X.com, right? If you were the latter, you were like pretty sure that Trump was going to win the election. If you were the former, you were like pretty sure the election would be like very close. Mm-hmm. X turned out to be more correct. We can argue that that's because it is a slightly more right now, neutral place, or at least more neutral relative to the alternative, right? I wouldn't call it neutral today exactly, but so, do we want neutral communication rails that can be used, to transfer information like without prejudice? I think we do, because it results in better information.
Yeah. Is there anything on that area that you find particularly interesting?
That's a good question. Funny thing, I was just been talking a lot this week about a project called Steemit, which is actually from the 2015, 2016 era of blockchain.
Okay.
And it was like, honestly, the first blockchain that probably got like 1 million mainstream users to use it.
Okay.
It was back then. And it almost had a bigger shot of taking over social media like back then. It didn't go well as a project for various reasons, but it almost had a bigger shot at that than like, the social media approaches and like Farcaster and stuff and Blue Sky today. I think it's harder today.
I had a couple guests on Social Today here. One of them said that we missed the boat to build the Twitters and Instagrams on chain, and that now it has to be like intrinsically different. And this person is actually building social on chain and has been building social just in general, like for the past few years. Mm-hmm. It was an interesting perspective. I must say that like I would have been like the core user on this realm, but it seems like the balloon is deflating, at least for now. This industry works in trends, at least during this period. But it would be interesting to see what happens there, because I feel like it's going to be something completely different. I think it's going to be more around communication than necessarily social. Something like Telegram might click there. I don't know. But let me ask you, what are your views on decentralized AI?
I'm a big proponent of decentralized AI. I've been expressing this as an investor for a number of years. At CoinFund, we are probably one of the more invested crypto funds in the intersection of AI and Web3. I would say, just to give you some ideas of like what we've invested in, we were pretty early investor in Worldcoin at the end of 2020, early 21.
Okay.
We did Jensen in 22. We did a number of investments throughout 23, Giza Tech, Bagel Network, Kiva AI,
okay,
Prime Intellect, and most recently Pluralis.
Okay.
And these are all expressions of the fact that we think that Web3 primitives and technology will open and democratize the pipeline or technology stack, really, that generates AI, that creates AI models and eventually products. And it's basically focusing on, the applications of decentralized compute aggregation, decentralized training, data pipelines. And we haven't made an investment in inference, but that could happen. over the next little while. But yeah, there's a lot more to say there, but that's the gist of it.
I actually moderated this panel a few days ago with actually investors, and it was purely focused on decentralized AI. One of the questions was around, we touched Worldcoin, and Worldcoin is incredibly polarizing.
No, it's not.
You could see like people's opinions being divided, at least at the moment.
Well, some people are right about Worldcoin and some people are wrong about Worldcoin.
Okay, let's hear your view.
What would you like to know?
I'm going to play the other side. The fact that a single company would have everyone's accurate identity.
They don't. Your assumption's wrong.
Okay, go on.
Well, this is what I'm saying is like people sometimes create this idea that like Worldcoin stores people's biometrics. They don't store people's biometrics. There are or were technically like certain edge cases where they could, but the fact of the matter is they don't. And they've actually put in just tremendous amount of energy and effort into not doing that. Whereas like any like naive system or simple system like wouldn't do that. For example, they've integrated, zero knowledge technology. They discard the actual data. They bend over backwards to not even expose the hashes of your biometrics, but instead provide like zero knowledge proofs that they exist. And so this idea that like Worldcoin stores people's biometrics is just wrong. It's just wrong.
It can be like if you let it play out years ahead. Of course, like right now, it's the dynamic is like they're trying to get as many users as possible, then have the applications on top. Like I get the point. I'm on board with that. I think that their main struggle is going to be, like governments getting on board with it because it can block it. And
well, hold on. So I appreciate, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go on.
Worldcoin they had an event about a month ago now
in SF
where they kind of like unveiled the next steps. And Worldcoin is really like 4 products, right? So let's just be like really clear about like what we're talking about. So one product is that they have a proof of humanity technology, right? This is where you like scan your eyes, you discard your biometrics, you get a hash, the hash gets included in a database, and you can prove that you're like a unique human using a zero knowledge proof. One product is then that flows into World ID, which is an identity that that is yours and again proves that you're a unique human.
Yeah.
Another product is that is Worldchain, which is a blockchain where, unlike any other blockchain in the world, you can actually count how many humans there are in it. When people say like, how many people use Bitcoin? Nobody knows. People know how many addresses are in Bitcoin. People know how many addresses are in Ethereum, but nobody knows how those addresses actually map to humans. Mm-hmm. This is the only blockchain in the world where you can actually count that. And if you're a human, you don't have to pay transaction fees in this blockchain. This is we just mentioned Steemit, right? Like one of the reasons that Steemit converted 1 million mainstream users was because it had this novel economics where the transaction fees of the network were subsidized by the inflation of their token. And what that shows is like, if you remove that barrier to entry for people, you get a lot of people on this network. So I think it's being like very underappreciated that once Worldchain sort of gets going with this, it's going to be one of the most accessible blockchains like ever, anywhere. And then they have a 4th product, which is their app store.
Yeah.
And can I say one more thing about that?
Yeah.
So a lot of people for the last 10 years have made the case that blockchain will be adopted in a consumer way, meaning bottom up, someone's going to create an app, that app's going to go viral, everyone's going to use it, blockchain is going to become mainstream. That has not happened, okay? Mm-hmm. when we talk about apps on our phone, we're talking about a market where 100,000 apps hit people's phones globally every month across iOS and Google. Out of that 100,000 apps, one or two or three, a couple, right, become long-term, growing, sustainable businesses. How many apps do we create in blockchain? 10 apps a month? 20 apps a month? 50 apps a month?
It's quite a lot.
But it's not 10,000. And it's certainly not 100,000, which is my point. So if we want blockchain to be adopted in a consumer way, we have to create some mechanism by which developers create that kind of volume. Like, at least give me 10,000 guys. That kind of volume of apps, so we can find the one or two products that actually have product market fit. And my argument is that Worldcoin's fourth product, which is the App Store, highly underappreciated thesis, because how many people in crypto have tried to do app stores before? Like a bunch, right? There's Ether phones and Solana phones and dApp store projects and this kind of dApp and that kind of dApp and dApp hub and whatever, right? But what we haven't done is we haven't created an environment where 100,000 dApps can come to market every month.
Yeah.
Until now.
I'll tell you what I see the problem, and I agree with some of the stuff you're saying. I think this is genius way of getting users. It's similar to Telegram with the mini apps, but it's like mini app inside of Telegram. There's also questions there, given the functionality and like getting out of Telegram itself. There is a comparison here to some extent, but it's different because on Worldcoin, the view would be more like Apple Store, downloading an app. What I see is, one, the quality of the network, which the counter to this argument would be, if you have AI and real humans, then even if these humans are from, low income, third world countries, whatever, real human is still better quality user than a bot, which is true. The let's say the middle, which is the vast, like people that create content, that share stuff with their friends, this would be the middle, and then at the top would be the content creators, the people that drive engagement and maybe like key figures that they would have strong influence even if they build it within the platform. For you to get the top ones, it takes a lot. The counter argument is the bot situation. So that when you compare with the bots, and you're not getting the bottom on Worldcoin, because Worldcoin right now is more towards the bottom, the human side. I can see the top coming as the bottom increases. I could see that behavior happening, because if someone wants to reach the masses and Worldcoin doesn't have like an algorithm that only shows the 10, like mass social media, I could see that working. The next issue would be around government, because governments can pretty much block anything. I mean, we just saw like Australia has blocked younger kids to use TikTok, and this is Australia. This is not China or Russia or anything. I don't know. Like I mean, this is the counter. I obviously you're super pro it, and I'm not necessarily against it. I think I see it as something polarizing. There's a lot to debate here, how it's going to play out.
Well, I mean, a lot of people who criticize Worldcoin for being, I guess, like a biometric approach. And by the way, Vitalik wrote on this, right? Like he has a blog post where he evaluated like every, conceivable approach to proof of personhood and comes to the conclusion that probably biometrics are, the best one.
Yeah.
In terms of getting the job done, right? But, different, I guess what I'm saying is like different jurisdictions are always going to have different kind of views in this technology. The same people who kind of say these things are also the people who scan their eyeballs at the airport when they take an international flight, or they use Clear, or they give their fingerprints to, various governments. The Indian government has a eyeball scanning centralized competitor where your biometrics actually do go into a government database, right? So, to me, like these things are important. These things are the future. And actually, like Worldcoin is the most Web3 values compliant implementation of that thing. Like if you are using like biometric systems anyway, like you should prefer Worldcoin.
Yeah, I can see it becoming more popular and then people just going over it, to be honest. Like the standard user might not care so much. I do think that some people will take a strong stance.
I mean, some people just don't like the idea of giving up their biometrics in the first place, which I can sympathize with.
Yeah.
It just feels funny and weird, and like that's okay. Like
there's
you
all
don't have to
sort
use
of people in the world, I guess. What other things in AI have you been interested on?
I have a very contrarian thesis on decentralized training, which is now sort of that consensus is now shifting dramatically. About 12 months ago, if you went to San Francisco and you asked some AI people about decentralized training, they would say, why are you thinking about that? That's stupid. That's never going to work. Hey, it's impossible, et cetera, et cetera. As an investor, I love to hear that kind of stuff because what that excites in me is like the need to find the truth of the matter. Or like frame my thinking, or actually I say a lot of times, like as an investor, my job is to just like pull people's biases back, including my own.
Yeah.
And so, it turns out that if you kind of take a step back and sort of look at how AI training is being done today in big tech companies and say like, well, hey, if we change our assumptions a little bit, if we assume that we live on this like decentralized network with all these nodes who don't know each other and they don't have high-end GPUs, they have kind of commodity hardware, and the hardware is like heterogeneous, not homogeneous, and it's connected by internet links which are slow. Given this like horribly disadvantageous setup, like what can we actually do? Can we train a big model? And it turns out that most of the research on this is done because, as a matter of fact, the big tech companies do train their models in these like decentralized ways. And there's a lot to learn from that I meant to say distributed ways. There's a lot to learn from that for decentralized networks. Okay. And it turns out that if one of my portfolio companies loves to remind me, they say, hey, by the way, we can solve hard problems. If it turns out if people are smart, if they sit down, if they take some time, if they think, if they, write stuff down on a piece of paper and like figure it out, we actually can train models in a decentralized way. And the good news is it's not 20 times more expensive. It's only like 20% more expensive.
Okay.
And what you get in exchange for that 20% is massive openness of these models. So that consensus started to shift. I think summer 2025 is going to be like decentralized AI summer.
Really?
For various reasons, yeah. But this one is an interesting one because a lot of this research that's being done around training and other kind of related issues, I think people are about to realize that actually solves a lot of problems in AI broadly too. Like if you solve the problem of going from high-end hardware to commodity hardware, that is a very relevant thing for like countries that don't have a lot of access to high-end hardware. They would love to train models on lower-end hardware, right? And so you're actually solving kind of this problem that a lot of people in San Francisco are not focused on because they're focused on AGI and, getting the biggest data center and building the largest, most frontier model. And so there's going to be a lot of papers that are published this year in the ML conferences like, NeurIPS and ICML, et cetera. And I think the convergence of Web 2 and Web 3 AI is going to really start in earnest. And one last thing to say is most people who want to get financial exposure to AI companies, AI projects, they can't really get into the private rounds of OpenAI and Anthropic and Perplexity and so on. And they don't really have that many public tickers to buy stocks in this. So the main way that they're going to be doing this is by buying crypto coins. And that's why it's going to be DAI summer.
Okay, I'm excited for this. Okay, let's talk layers. Layer 1, layer 2s. Well, what's your view here? What's going to happen? There's been so many layers this year, too many L2s coming up. There's a lot of good stuff as well. Not obviously, volume is not necessarily bad. We can pick the good stuff out. Give me your thoughts.
You know that Don Draper meme? I don't think about it at all.
Oh.
That's me with layer 1 and layer 2 right now. And the reason why is layer 1 and layer 2 is they're just supply side technology. And in blockchain, we've created every conceivable combination of supply side technology. We've created L1s and L2s and L3s and sidechains and rollups and ZK rollups and optimistic rollups and plasma and this thing and that thing, right? What I really care about is where is the demand coming from? Who is the demand? Is it a bank? Is it a startup? Is it a this like social network or something? And like, what are their requirements, right? There are people who say, Solana is going to win. But I think that view is like so incomplete because you can't just say Solana is going to win. You're going to say Solana is going to win because like this kind of participant will come and create demand for Solana. And if you tell me like that participant is a bunch of banks who are all going to co-locate on a single chain and with meme coins and all share the same architecture that they don't control or govern, I would be like very, very skeptical about that. As an engineer, like I know, enterprises like really want to control their technology stack. And so I actually think for like I do think the institutions and banks and stuff will go on public chains. But I think those chains are more likely to be like modular blockchains than a single monolithic chain where everyone co-locates. So, that's a facetious sort of way of me saying, I don't care so much about like what's the next hot L1. I care about like who's the next big customer.
It's very strong hot takes you had here today. I really enjoyed it. I could definitely keep talking for longer, but we need to wrap it up. For everyone watching, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at JBRUKH, Jake Brukhman.
Jake, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.